Hello again, it's Alan Stevens with your Monday morning Media Coach Tip. This week I'm talking about speeches being sincere, simple and positive. Three elements that if you put them into a speech, you will deliver a much better speech than most people do. Now obviously most people think they're sincere, they use simple language and they're positive, but this is not always the case. So let me give you some examples. Let's say for example you're making a wedding speech. Some people would say, isn't she a wonderful, beautiful, radiant bride? Well, that's okay, but it sounds better if you say she's a wonderful, beautiful, radiant bride. In other words, you emphasize the nouns, not the adjectives. That's what you're really talking about, isn't it? You're talking about the individual, so you should emphasize the important element, which is normally the noun, not the adjective. That increases the feeling of sincerity when you're speaking. I know there's that old phrase that says if you can fake sincerity, you've got it made, but you really do need to be sincere. So when you're delivering a speech, sincerity is really important. The second element I want to talk about is simplicity. Now, simplicity seems to go out of the window when a lot of people speak. I've heard people start their speeches with something like this. As I stand here at this moment in time, what I would like to say to you is this. Well, all of that's completely unnecessary and nobody really talks like that in real life. For some reason, sometimes when people get up on stage and behind a lectern, they feel they have to go into an entirely different sort of vocabulary, an entirely different sort of delivery. There is no need for that at all. You should talk in the same simple language that you do when you're having a conversation with your friends. Speeches are conversational, and if you preface your speech with all sorts of fluff, people will lose interest. The first thing that you say in your speech has to be something which grabs people's attention, and it's got to be simple. It has to be straightforward. So when you're thinking about starting your speech, in fact, when you're thinking about your entire speech, simplicity is the key word. So you've got to be sincere, you've got to be simple, and the third element that I talked about there, positivity. Now I know we all talk about positivity and negativity, and we want to be positive rather than negative and so on. But you need to think very carefully about how you're using language in your speech. Some people use negative languages without even thinking about how they're doing it. For example, I've heard somebody talking about non-foreign people. Well, that's people who live here, presumably. Nobody's part of a non-group. People are part of a group. They're described in some way. They're not described as what they're not. And the other thing is people will sometimes define themselves by what they're not. You know, they're not interested in this, they're not interested in that. I'd rather know what they're interested in. What is it that drives them? What are the positive statements? So when you're creating your speech, try and remove those non-elements. Don't tell people what you're not, tell people what you are. So those three things to make sure you include in your speech: being sincere, that's by emphasizing the nouns rather than the adjectives; being simple, by using simple language and not dressing it up in the sort of language you wouldn't use; and being positive, saying exactly what you mean all of the time. So if you do those three things, your speeches will improve a great deal. Wish you all the best of luck.